SOG. Man, I actually been thinking this, and I don't think I actually said it out loud or said it typed it in anybody's chat. But y'all know I made some videos talking about Ward, and Ward, wanting to fight Canelo, and that he would probably come. He said for the right price he would come out of retirement to fight Canelo and such. And one of the things I thought about when he started training, when they said he was working with Caleb Plant, I said, man, if this is Ward's way to make Canelo, because Canelo's kind of egotistical. A lot of people don't acknowledge that. Canelo is very, very egotistical in my opinion. And I feel like I felt like Canelo was going to say something about Ward being in that corner, because Ward's one of those guys that, despite what Canelo's doing, diehard boxing fans don't look at Canelo and say this guy's better than Andre Ward was, or that this guy is, he's more decorated, or he's more than, Andre Ward is one of those guys that people look at Canelo and say that if Ward in his prime would have mopped the floor with Canelo, Ward would have never went up to 168 and fought Andre Ward like he's at 168 fighting these guys to come undisputed. That's what I think. So I felt like that when Ward showed up with Plant, that it was going to agitate Canelo, and that he was going to get to a point to where if he beats Plant, he was going to probably make a statement about he don't mind fighting Andre Ward, or something of that nature. So I kind of felt that way when I saw it. I said, man, if Andre Ward is doing this so that Canelo will finally, try to fight him, then it'll work. But as Marlo said, he would call him out now that he's been out of the ring for years. Ward went out of the ring with a lot of injuries, and he went out of the ring, basically trying to mend. He actually filed a lawsuit against somebody about his knee injury, basically about, it costing him his career, and all the revenue that he could have made. So I can't remember. I think it seemed like $7 million or something that he sued somebody about his knee problem. But the reality is that, Andre Ward is that much older. He has that much ring rust. It's not unheard of for guys to be out of the ring a long time and come back and fight, an established champion. It's happened before. We saw, Andre Ward is a very exceptional fighter. I think Andre Ward is a great fighter. I look at what Andre Ward done in that Super 6 tournament where he went in. I've heard people say that they felt like that tournament was catered for Andre Ward to go in there and win it, but I felt like Andre Ward and Darrell were the underdogs in that tournament. And that for those guys going there and do what they did, of course, Darrell ended up losing a decision to Frost, and I felt like he won. And then he beat Arthur Abraham, or was on his way to beating him clean, but then he got the disqualification win, and then he was out of the tournament, but then Ward ran through everybody else. So that was, to me, that showed a lot on those young guys. They were young in their careers at that time, but especially for Ward, he basically hit the ground running and never looked back after that. And for Ward to come back after all this time away from the sport and fight a guy like Canelo, to me, that's not out of the realm of it's not inconceivable. Because if you look at a guy like Sugar Ray Leonard, he was out like 2 years after his retinal surgery. He had came back for a fight. It didn't go like he wanted. He won, but he got dropped. It just felt like he wasn't the same guy, and then he stayed away for 3 years, and then he came back and fought Hagler. And Hagler, was just coming off of knocking out Mugabe. And then you look at Vitaly Klitschko. He was out 4 years. He came back and fought Sam Peter. And I'm not saying that, Sam Peter's on the level of Canelo or on the level of Marvin Hagler. Sam Peter was a dangerous heavyweight. And Vitaly Klitschko came back after 4 years out of the sport with injuries. And didn't take a tune-up or nothing, went right in the ring with that man who basically took his brother to the brink, dropped him like 78 times in their fight. And then, even though he lost, but then bitterly went in there and fought him and made him quit on the stool. You know, just beat him down. So it's not inconceivable for a fighter who's been out of the sport. And of course, you have to look at how the guy fights. You know, mobility is a large part of how he fights. He's been out with leg injuries. And even without that, you know, most of the time you come back from a long layoff, your legs aren't going to be what they were. But Sugar Ray Leonard seemed his legs were good enough to get him out of the way versus Hagler. So I don't know, you know. But right now, Ward versus Canelo isn't the fight. It's Plant versus Canelo,